Well, you can do all those things and so much more. Just grab a seat in the chair or the floor. Sit back, relax, recline. While she drops another casual line. You're tuned into Casually Mollie with Mollie and Bergie.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Casually Mollie podcast. I am your host, Mollie Ambergy, based here in St. Louis. We interview guests each week. They are comedians, artists, entertainers, just a variety of everything that you could possibly imagine. But today, we have a lovely guest in house. We have matching jean jackets for those tuning in on YouTube. Give it up for St. Louis-based comedian Meredith Hopping. Yes!
I didn't know if there was going to be an applause sound bite.
You know, maybe we should look into that. Yes.
Women are resourceful.
Yeah, we are. We are resourceful. Before we get into Meredith's interview, though, Meredith, are you interested in any house prints or jewelry for your collection of artistry?
Always.
Well, I think you should tune into our partners at the Serial Sweetheart Art. Do you want to hear a little bit more about them?
I would love to.
Absolutely. Speaking of women being resourceful, see, this is why we have this girl on. Okay, we gotta partner up here. This is a woman-founded company by my dear friend Dana Schmuddy, who has partnered with us for this month for Women's History Month. Check her out at Serial Sweetheart Art on Instagram, Facebook. She's got a great Etsy shop. So just support your, you're just artists, just anybody that you like. If you like print, if you like jewelry, you're going to want to check this girl out. But yeah, it's like kind of some serial fun stuff and also some sweet things for your significant other, your family, your mom, anybody. Just hit her up at Serial Sweetheart Art. But Meredith, back to us. I'm just happy to have you here.
Two very pale ladies.
Yes, two very pale
in
ladies.
The loo. I was hoping for more alliteration there. There isn't. It's just no ladies in the loo.
Ooh, I kind of like that.
How has no one used that?
How? You could just follow at Meredith Hopping. That would be great. If you're watching again on YouTube, you will see the bottom handle. It's fine. Meredith, first of all, I said this earlier, but for listeners, I'm so happy that you're here.
Thank you for having me.
Are you kidding me? Listen, I know you can't see it right now, but she's got this great green jumpsuit on, and I'm a huge fan of cheetah print. She's got some leopard cheetah print heels on.
I mean,
lift it up. Would it be a Meredith Hopping podcast if her leg wasn't in the air at one
without
point?
My glaring calf muscle. Blinding.
We gotta show
put a
it
trigger warning before this episode, please. You may want to wear your sunglasses.
Wear your sunglasses for the calf or the cheetah print heel. Chris Denman, who owns he's a co-founder, of the Midcoast Media, made us these lovely drinks. I forget the name of the drink.
Here's hoping he didn't roofie him, right? Oh, God, you can't say things like that now.
Oh, he would never. Never. But let's talk about...
And it's not okay. Roofing is bad.
That is definitely not something to get behind.
Oh my gosh.
Speaking of, things to get behind though, Meredith and I did go to an open mic on Monday called Big Daddies, where I ran into her and I was like, hey girl, you need to come on my podcast because I haven't seen you in a hot minute. And I usually use this as an excuse for people I haven't seen in a minute, just because of the pandemic. And I wanted to kind of highlight, you are one of my favorite people because when I first met you, Key, you're going to find this really funny. Key, it's going to be
listen, Key.
Listen, Key, and anybody that is listening right now. In St. Louis, we're very fortunate at the comedy scene that we have, and Meredith did welcome me with open arms. You and your comedy partner, Sam Lyons. Yes, love him. He also runs St. Louis Independent Comedy with myself and Yael Hollander and Chris Sear. You had a showcase at the Geselig.
Yes.
That was yours, mine, and ours. Yeah. And now, are you still going to maybe do that when the pandemic is over?
I don't think so. So I helped my boy, Sam Lyons, get the job of co-host of NPR's Story Collider.
Oh, yes. That was a big deal.
And so I'm
You're
kind
welcome,
of like,
Sam.
you're welcome. Where would you be without
Meredith?
Me? Sam jokes that when I went through my divorce, he was super, super supportive. And I got to stay at his place a lot when I didn't have any place to stay. But we were, after a Funny Bone open mic, we went to Trainwreck. And I had maybe had a few drinks.
Yeah, as you do at the Trainwreck Saloon, for those of you who aren't familiar.
As a woman in her mid-30s does when divorcing. But so these guys came up to him and they were drunk and they were like, let me touch your hair.
No, they didn't.
And I was like, I started bawling. And I was like,
oh my God.
It's not just a bit. It's not just a bit, it's real, because he has a joke about people touching his hair, asking to touch his hair and he's a black man. And so he was just like, how are you right now crying about people inappropriately trying to touch my hair and making this about you?
Oh, shit.
Like you're still finding a way to make someone being racist towards me about you.
Oh, my gosh.
So, I mean... Yeah,
but you're
that's
in a safe
woke white woman for you. That's peak woke white woman.
Well, earlier I was saying, because I was like, this podcast is obviously named after me, but I was like, Meredith, we're in a safe space to make this about you, because I'm going to ask you a bunch of questions. But shout out to Sam Lyons. I haven't seen him in a minute, Sam. I hope you're doing really well. But speaking of, like, you are definitely a super supportive person, though, because this is when I was like a lot newer to comedy, and I was trying to like check out the different shows. Yeah. And I showed up at your show and you were so sweet. You're like, here's this person, and I was like, you're introducing me to everybody. And then I sat down and I guess some guys were creeping on me and I didn't know it. But Yale Hollander told me afterwards, he's like, yeah, Meredith Hopping. And Yale Hollander, for those of you who don't know him, he's been on the podcast. He's great. In the St. Louis comedy scene here, he's like our Jewish dad / uncle. He helps run St. Louis independent comedy as well. He was like, yeah, Meredith came up to me out of all people and was like, hey, those guys are creeping on Molly. Can you like keep a lookout for her? And he's like, and here I am now. I'm joining in with these guys creeping on you.
Because we just don't see Yale as a sexual being at all.
Not at all. And he's just cracking up. And I was like, oh my God.
No, because it takes a village. That's how ridiculous it is to be a woman in a public place.
Right.
I knew that I would have to be on stage doing stuff and like... You're like,
Yale is a safe person to do this for.
Take care of it, Yale.
And then during the same show... I'm just going to say it. Richie James was in it. And this is when he's like my little brother in comedy, but he grew up from this experience. He goes up there in front of people who I don't know. And he's like, I know we're all nervous because Molly Ambergy is here. And I was like, what? And your church friends were there. And they all just kind of stared at me. I was like, hi, Meredith's church friends. Yeah. Very nice to meet you. I was like, what?
Yeah, I mean, Richie is someone who my ex-husband is a pastor. And so I had quite a few church-related friends and a pastor who was also like an adjunct professor messaged me on Facebook and said, I've got this student that's really interested in stand-up comedy. Can I pass along your info? And I said, absolutely. That's great. So then after Richie being at a few open mics, he comes up to me and he says, yeah, my professor says this person's name.
Shut up.
Gave me your info, but I went and looked at your profile and saw you were married and decided to not contact you anymore.
Oh my God. So Richie, you've made your rounds, buddy.
Yeah. Richie, you were doing it for the wrong reasons.
The wrong reasons. Calling you out, man. I know you've grown since then, though, so I appreciate it. But, you, Meredith, like I said, you are really active in the comedy scene here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about your background for those of you who don't know you personally, how you got into comedy?
I got into comedy. I was a theater major.
Me too.
We don't really like people to know that, though, about about us because there are times when theater majors will get up to do stand-up and you know immediately that they were theater majors. So I almost have some pride in the fact that people didn't know for a while that I was a theater major. A theater and opera major. Grew up, I'm the granddaughter, daughter, and ex-wife of pastors. So like lots of public speaking opportunities. My mom is a communications professor. But I never tried doing stand-up or improv because at Illinois State University, where I went for undergrad for theater, the funny people were the funny people, right? Mm-hmm. And you didn't necessarily infiltrate the funny people.
That's very true.
Like
I didn't think of it that way.
The improv group was very hardcore, and that improv group is now like the Try Guys on BuzzFeed. So it's not like, and my friend Caitlin Barlow has created teachers on TV Land. Yeah. Like people who have done amazing things, right?
Absolutely.
And so like my intimidation was real and warranted, but I wasn't about to try to be funny. And it wasn't until my senior year in an auditioning class, a professor was like, "Oh, Meredith, you're funny." I'm just like, could we have done anything about this in the past 4 years?
That's usually how it goes. Senior year is when things suddenly start to happen. You're like, where was this 3 years ago?
I'm so glad I'm in debt for you to say now in my last semester, you're funny. So had some life, got married super young, had 3 babies, and I had my 3rd child, my son, Valentine's Day of 2017. Mm-hmm. And Trump had also just gotten inaugurated.
Yeah.
And between postpartum depression and Trump, I was at my wit's end. And I had always, when I turned 30, I had made a list of like, these are 30 things I'm going to try now that I've turned 30. Mm-hmm. And in my perfectionist head, I was going to do all of them that year.
Oh, that's how it goes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I don't know. However, one of them was stand up. And so I was like, I've got to do it. Like I'll try it. It'll be something tangible that I will have control over, because if I go up there and no one laughs, there's no one to blame but me. And so there was a sense of controlling my environment, like grasping onto what I do have control over. And the first time I was going up, so I researched, the Funny Bone is super close to my house at the time. I know that you have to have 4 minutes. I know you get up no matter what, if it's your first time doing stand-up. And so I'm going to write my 4 minutes and I'm going to do it. And so I'm waiting to go up, and the person right before me is bombing.
Oh, yeah.
Like to a painful extent. And so my friends were texting me like, stop, look away. Look away, because your empathy is going to get going and you're going to be so distracted and feel so bad for them.
Oh, that's so
you're
sweet.
You're not going to be able to focus. And they were right.
Aww.
Like they were right. But it's super funny because I went up and I did my first set, and that first laugh, as I'm sure you can completely relate to, that first laugh is like, I imagine what crack is like. Mm-hmm. The feeling is the most intoxicating thing ever. And I think especially for me at that time with Trump and everything felt so out of control. Right. And it felt like, are we really watching this happen? And so to do something and say words that then sparked a joy in people and like caused this reaction, it was the most life-giving thing ever. And I'm a pretty spiritual person, and I audibly heard God, the universe, whatever, when I'm doing my first set, say, this is how you're going to get rid of your husband's student loan debt.
Really?
So in my head, I'm like, I'm going to make it big so fast and pay off, because my husband had like over $100,000 in student loan debt.
Yeah.
So a lot. And it was a big like weight on us. And so as I'm like starting to do showcases that pay like $20 a pop, I was like, God, this isn't happening as fast as I thought it was. And then my husband filed for divorce, and I don't have his student loan debt anymore.
There you go. So God took you.
Sometimes it just doesn't look the way we think it's gonna look.
It doesn't look, but I mean, if you are like God did take you, or whoever took you in a good direction,
right?
And now you're here on the Casually Mollie podcast. Woo! Cheers to that! Yeah, follow us on Instagram. There you go. But no, like I said, I just remember you always being really kind to me. And then when you told me you were a theater major, I was like, oh my God, I was too. But when I met you, you were a blonde. And yes,
I was a blonde and married.
Yes. And you look, like I said, you look great both as a blonde, as a brunette. But what I really, honestly, Meredith, and I'm pretty sure I've told you this just as friends, but what I really respect about you is because I'm 30 now, and you're telling your story about you being 30. So I kind of look up to you. That says to me, I kind of look up to you.
She has to look up to me.
I have to.
I'm 6 feet tall. She does look up to me.
I've got, we'll show off my cap. Hold on.
Yes,
I've got my shoes on
Mollie's
today.
cap, and she's still much shorter than me.
I love it. It's all right. I was standing next to Jimmy the other day, and I was like, did you get taller? And he's like, babe, I think you're just wearing flats today. And I was just like, okay, so I'm short. Thank you. I always try to be like,
pandemic, different shoes will make you feel real different.
For real. I used to remember, I was like, oh, I'm in my pumps, I'm this. And now that I'm wearing like flats and like I remember like even just getting dressed for this, I was like, oh, Meredith is gonna look good, so I gotta like dress up, and I gotta look like somewhat put together. But that's what I'm saying, being put together. What I love about you is that, sometimes I'm like, I do want to be a mom someday, but there aren't many people who are encouraging of like, well, I shouldn't say that. There are just some people that are encouraging. They're like, oh, if you have a kid, you're not gonna be able to do comedy. You're not gonna be able to do all of this. And you do it all. You're a mom, you're doing e-learning, you're doing comedy, you're funny. And on top of it, you still have which is hard to find in comedy, you've got a soul.
I do still. There's a little remnant. It's like when the soap is almost gone in the shower, but I'm hanging on for dear life.
I'm going to make it work, which is what I want to know. What's your secret? Like, how do you make it work? How do you pull it together with the pumps, the jumpsuit, the jean jacket, and the lip that we both have on?
I mean,
how do you make it work?
So the gift I was given when my divorce happened, which was a complete departure from what I thought life was going to be. So I got married at 21, grew up in the church. I understood that I was going to be married and have babies and be a stay-at-home mom. And at the time I got divorced, I was like a stay-at-home homeschool mom, and I adored it. I loved doing homeschooling, and then I would go and do stand-up at night. And so it was completely feasible when I was married. But it's interesting, I can look back, the first time I did stand-up, I was wearing black skinny jeans, a black t-shirt, and like just a chambray button-up, and I was still trying to hide myself because I'm 6 feet tall. And so I've always felt like, like my physical presence is so big in and of itself. And I have to tone that down for people. And then as I kept doing stand-up, and as I realized in my marriage there were certain things that I was going to no longer tolerate, and that I was worth more than what I was tolerating, you can see the progression of my clothing and even my lipstick. And because I realized, and I think this comes with getting older, like getting older as a woman is the most amazing thing ever. Like you just care less about what other people think, more and more and more and more. And with the divorce, I was forced in one fell swoop to not care about what anyone thought. Or I was not going to survive. And so, now I do things like I have probably 30 different colors of lipstick. And I love lipstick. Like, That's such a mundane, silly little thing, but it brings me joy. And I don't care if anyone else cares about my lipstick. It makes me happy. And so I've forced myself, if I ever catch myself going to conform, right, to someone else's idea of what something should look like, I'm like, wait, is this bringing me joy? Mm-hmm. Is this life-giving to me? And I think that's the most important thing anyone can do for themselves, let alone a performer and a creative person, is you have to decide what it is that brings you joy. And then you have to do that, and you have to realize that not everyone's going to be on board at all. And that the people that aren't on board aren't your people. And that's not something that as women we're told is okay. We're supposed to please everyone all the time. Mm-hmm. And so I'm also a recovering people pleaser. And it's rough. It's really rough.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I didn't grow up in necessarily a religious household, but you know, I grew up Italian, and I came from a blended family, which I always explain. So some people are like, blended. It sounds like a Starbucks order, but it's. I understand how you feel in the sense of where it's. People are like, oh yeah, you're gonna get married, you're gonna have kids, it's gonna be
a certain trajectory.
Yeah. There's and I think because I was the last kid and I was the only kid between my parents, and, I love them to death, but I think they were like, all right, like we had our families. Now this is the kid that's going to like go and do this. Right. And then it wasn't that they didn't like that I was in theater. I think it was just kind of surprising. Mm-hmm. Like it was like, oh, you're that so artistic, sense. Like everybody else was in sports or, I have like people who are pharmacists. So I kind of shot out of nowhere, as my siblings like to call it. So I understand how you feel. The only difference for me was that I never felt like I had to please anybody because I already knew I was like, oh, I'm a weirdo, so I'm not going to please anybody. But what I love about you though, is even though you say you're recovering and all of this, what I love about you is like, yes, you're doing comedy, you're doing all of this, but you are still so family focused. I love seeing all the beautiful pictures of you and your kids. I met Gus in person when he was a little one because at the Funny Bone, it was so cute. You brought him in one night and I didn't even know you that well. And I was like, your son is so cute. You're like, you can hold him. Yeah. And so
this was pre-COVID, right?
Totally pre-COVID.
We would just shove babies on anyone.
Babies. So there's like a baby. So I get a drink from the bar and Gus is, and your son was so cute. He gave me a kiss on the cheek and I was like, what a loving,
the most loving little.
He gets an example from you on that. And I kind of wanted to ask, like, what do your kids think about you doing comedy? Do they know about it?
Yeah, they love it. Yeah. I even had a really funny thing where when I started doing roast shows, they wanted to know what that meant. And so I explained it to them, and my then 9-year-old and 7-year-old girls, I have 2 girls and then a boy, they were discussing what roasts were, and the younger one, Frankie, was like, well, you're too tall. How's the air? And I was like, girl, that is weak. And that will not be acceptable in this house. Yeah, right. If you're going to roast, you're going to do it well. And so then we weren't talking about it at all. It was right around Christmas time. I was making dinner and I hear Eleanor, my eldest, say, hey, Mom, I'd ask you to come in here and put the star on top of the tree, but that would be too low for you.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
What?
Pretty proud parenting moment, honestly, with that. So they love it. Although it was funny because around Halloween, we like to watch different Halloween movies.
Oh, understandable. Yeah.
And we watched Haunted Mansion, which has Eddie Murphy in it.
Yes.
I mean, there's only so many Halloween movies. You're kind of scraping the bottom.
Just like, well, let's go back. Let's just go through the archive.
And so they were asking about him. And so I always like to point out to them when someone in a movie or a TV show is a stand-up, or started out doing stand-up so they can have some context. And so I told them that about Eddie Murphy. And then the next day on e-learning, I hear my daughter saying, my mom is just like Eddie Murphy. It's like, I mean, like, okay.
I'll take it.
Might need to be some more context, but
right. Be like, sure. But I'm sure, like, this is what my next question was. Like, I'm sure all of these, between your faith, your family, your life experiences, even your divorce, I'm sure that inspires your comedy.
Oh, 100%.
How do you, what I kind of, and not to interrupt you, but what I love about you too is that you take these experiences, even the ones that would consider, tragic, which we do in comedy a lot. We take something that could be a tragedy and be sad in our lives and twist it to humor, which people can relate to. What would you say, would that be kind of your style of comedy, kind of?
Absolutely. I think people get surprised at what I'm willing to talk about. And I just feel like that's the most important thing is I'll get to do stand up in churches sometimes. And I don't really change my material very much between churches and the clubs. And so I have a lot about being pregnant and giving birth and pooping while giving birth. And yes, I did that in a church. And these little old ladies, the ones that you would expect to be so like, oh my gosh, did she really say that in church? They came up to me afterwards and they were like, that's just how my pregnancy was. Why doesn't anyone ever talk about that? And then there was a little girl who happened to be there who hadn't been in church. She was 6 and she hadn't been in church since she had been baptized as an infant. And she was dying, like falling off of her pew because she was seeing a woman standing up there talking about pooping. And I just feel like I have such a heart for the church, obviously growing up in it and being such a part of it. And it is doing most everything wrong right now. And I think many people can agree with that. And so I just looked at that and it's like, that's where the church needs to get back to, is the humanity, is the reality of who we are and how we were created. And we've got to stop sterilizing everything and pretending that these human experiences aren't things that every single one of us sitting in the pews are having. So yeah, I just think that's my favorite thing. And I think you'll maybe relate to this as a female stand-up comic. There have been times, especially early on, where I would go to an open mic. It would be all men, except for me, on the lineup, and not many people in the audience, right? And so something that I knew was funny, like I know this is a good joke, I do it and it wouldn't get a good response.
Sure.
And then I'd go and do it at a show or a showcase and it would get an amazing response because it was a crowd of normal people, not comics. And I would even have some guys come up to me and be like, we didn't know that was funny. And I'm like, that's what, we
didn't know. I love that.
Sometimes you got to talk about what people are experiencing instead of just dick jokes. There's so much more everyday life. And the other thing I adore about comedy is growing up being so tall and so awkward and never feeling like I fit in. Stand-up comedy is one of those things where the more and more and more and more you are yourself and you dive into what is unique about you, the more authentic your material is and the funnier it is.
Yeah.
And I adore that so much about stand-up because all of it doesn't fix everything, right?
Sure.
It doesn't fix all our trauma. And let me say this too, the wise attempting to be healthy stand-up comedians across the gamut are in therapy. Like, we're not actually using stand-up as our therapy.
Right.
It helps because it's an outlet, but it is not a substitute for real therapy. And yet the connection that can happen between people when you're on stage and you allow them to laugh at something that they previously didn't find funny, right? I have a joke about my divorce where people are like, oh, did you see signs? Did you see it coming? I say, well, he was watching a lot of Netflix, particularly a lot of Marie Kondo's life-changing magic of tidying up. And so he held me and decided I no longer sparked joy.
Right.
And Joy is my middle name. And so
I laughed too because I also have seen her do this show.
Yeah.
So.
But I did that joke like right after the divorce. Like I don't think, both in the experiencing this in the church and then also in society at large, we want to hide so much that we don't think is acceptable, that we're scared of what someone else is going to think about. And since my divorce and doing stand-up, that's a privilege that we have, that literally every single person can step into themselves. All we have to do is make the decision, you no longer get to shame me for this. Your opinion on this no longer has any bearing on the decisions I make in my life. And I just wish more of us would do that.
No, that you have hit, first of all, very beautifully phrased. Thank you. Theater majors, we know how to say things, okay?
I do like that. No, I get made fun of by our fellow St. Louis stand-up comedians a lot for how unnecessarily long my Instagram posts are.
So here's the thing.
Because I like to wax poetic on how I saw a spot on the floor and it reminded me of the beauty of the world.
Listen, sometimes you have to have an oracle to discuss it. I get it. Here's the thing about social media. Look at it or don't. You know what I mean? Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, sometimes I'm like, maybe I don't have the time to read it right now, but who knows? Maybe later I'll be in bed, and I look at stuff and I'm like, oh, Meredith said something very enlightening. But no, what I agree with you, because I think I probably told you this, obviously not on here, but my sister was going through a divorce at the same time. And she was getting hers. I think hers was obviously closer to being finalized, and then yours had just started. But I remember the first time, I don't think it was the very first time maybe you did it, or maybe it was, I don't know. But I was there and I remember you were like, I'm going through a divorce. And it was an open mic. And I was like, woohoo!
Right.
And literally one time Meredith was so cute. She's like, and Molly's got me every time. She claps every time I say that. Well, I understand that, because it is such a brave thing. And I know that sounds so cliche, and I should be thinking of better vernacular. And I apologize.
White woman calling something brave.
Right. I'm like, I'm not a thesaurus, guys. I'm not that smart. I'm sorry. I need Webster Dictionary ASAP. But I do think that a lot of times, I've heard this other comedians who are obviously much more famous than I am, talk about that, is like using comedy, you have control almost over the events that you do have. And I do think that it is very inspirational that you use that. But talking about even just your process, I told Meredith earlier, I did some stalking on her for this interview, like I do with everybody. And I found this lovely article about you in St. Louis Magazine. They used an interview you did with our mutual friend, Chris Sear, who helps run St. Louis Independent Comedy. You were talking about the process of, you first start, when you do comedy, you do open mics, then you start doing showcases and you're hosting at clubs. With the pandemic, that has kind of come to a shutdown. Certain places are opening up here. We have, in the Midwest, I know there's other places too. Just things are a little bit, we'll just say, more different than they maybe once were. What have you been doing during the meantime? I know you've been producing Hoppy Happy Hour, and then I've been seeing you hosted a couple of places. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
I think, we all set out at the beginning of this pandemic, here's the self-improvement I'm going to do, and here's all the books I'm going to read, and the language I'm going to learn, and I'm going to bake bread, and all this stuff.
Right.
And the reality is that even in our attempts to have time and rest, it still became about production. and how much can I produce in my time of self-improvement. And I'm so guilty of that too.
Same.
I like quantifiable things. Love a good before and after picture. That's just how we are conditioned to be and what we're conditioned to react to. And I found myself really beating myself up because I didn't feel like I was producing very much. And I finally had to get to a point, and I read a book that I recommend everyone read, Untamed by Glennon Doyle.
I bought that book. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's every woman especially should read it. It's really funny because I read it and I thought, oh, if my mom reads this, it would be really good for our relationship. And I thought I can just ask her to read it. I'll just ask her to read it. So I asked her to read it, but at the same time, I had just ended things with the guy I was seeing. And Glennon Doyle is married to Abby Wambach, who's an Olympian soccer player. And so I'm talking to my mom. I'm wanting to know what she thinks of the book. And she's like, honey, do you have something to tell us?
Oh,
and I was like, I don't think so. Like, not a lot's going on.
Yeah,
and
nothing's
she was
happening.
like, we love you no matter what. And I was like, I'm glad to know. She thought I was coming out because I had ended things with a guy and then made her read a book.
That's so sweet though. She's like, don't worry, we love you. And you're like, that's
I'm like,
good.
Mom, I wish. Like, sometimes I think life would be easier if I could, but turns out it's not a choice.
Right.
It's not a choice.
Mm-hmm. I know. It was a choice that we suddenly had matching jean jackets.
It
you know.
Mine is from the Bloomington Normal Gap in Eastland Mall circa 2002.
And I told Meredith mine is from Found by the Pound, but it may possibly be from 2002.
Maybe it's, yeah.
You know, who knows? Who has
the magic of thrifting?
Right, the magic of thrifting. We're not quite sure, but no, I haven't read that book yet. I did buy it. I am reading a book. I think you'll like it too. It's called Grand by Sarah Schaefer.
Okay,
and she's 40 and she's going on a whitewater rafting trip.
Nice.
And in between, because she's like, oh, you know, with each of my siblings, I'm going on a trip to do something with them. And this is the one that she did with her sister. And in between, I haven't finished it yet, so that's why I don't have the ending. But in between, she has her life story in between each one.
That's great.
So she connects the trip with her childhood almost. So it talks about growth and facing your fears. And it's just, I'm not doing it justice because she's such a great writer and she's written for Jimmy Kimmel and all that.
Very cool.
Or maybe Jimmy, I gotta look at I'm sorry, Sarah Schaefer.
Jimmy.
It's one of those Jimmys, you know.
She wrote for a Jimmy.
But, and then what I do know, she was with Nikki Glaser on Not Safe, but it's just a really beautiful thing to see women writing such beautiful material like that, which brings me to you. You've been writing, I'm sure, a lot of stuff during this break, but what I kind of wanted to highlight is that you were just in Mason City Limits Comedy Club. Is that correct? How did that show go?
It was so fun. Oh my goodness. I got to headline that show and it was a crowd that wanted to be there, just this super small off the road venue where what I love about stand-up comedy, and especially when it's at a club, is that people have come there to watch comedy. And we run into a lot doing shows at other venues, restaurants, barbecues, where you're not necessarily there because you came to watch comedy. And when an entire audience is connected to you, and people are so ready to laugh right now, so ready, but also have to be retrained to laugh in public, and that it's okay to make noise and be seen. Because we've been sitting on our couches just kind of zoning out for so long. And so I always, if I'm hosting an open mic or a comedy show where I know there are a lot of people who have never attended a comedy show, I make it clear, like, we want you to laugh. This is a responsive thing. And that's why during the pandemic, I've almost even versus a live show where people are masked, because there are some venues where you have to stay masked the entire time. Unless you're taking a drink. So then what happens for us as stand-ups is not only is your audible reaction muffled, but we lose all your nonverbals as well. And so what I've actually loved is this, I got to do a couple Zoom shows for Flappers in Burbank, which is like, that's magical.
I did one with Meredith, so we got to do it together.
There's a lot to be upset about and disheartened about with this pandemic, but there have been things through the magic of Zoom and the internet that would have never happened before this that I'm very thankful for. But what I love about the Flappers one is that they put the whole audience on the screen on Zoom. So even if someone chooses to be muted, right, because people get very self-conscious about it, you can still see their nonverbals, and there's still that connection and exchange of energy. And it's just, I prefer that almost to super small, super distanced live show.
Yeah, no, that was a really cool experience, because I know you've done a couple. I was very happy, again, to our Jewish dad / uncle, Yale Hollander. He put Meredith and I on a show together, and that was one of the best parts. And I think your parents, didn't they tune in on that?
Well, they did. And,
I'm sorry, I'm just laughing.
Yeah, they're so supportive. They're the most amazing people. They thought I was going to be an opera singer when I was growing up, and now I do this. And so my sweet dad, even the first time, I think it was a show here at Sophie's actually that he came to. But it was the first time I did any material about being divorced and having to jump back into the dating scene and trying to learn how to sext.
Ooh.
Which isn't a very, no dad is real thrilled about hearing that. So afterwards he said, well, I certainly don't like the material, but there's no denying that your delivery is impeccable.
Oh, I love that he used impeccable.
Isn't
that was lovely.
But that's just that's the best way to still be supportive.
Yep.
While being a dad.
It's true.
It's great. But they were on it, and I tried out a new joke about, during the pandemic, my parents did more invasive genetic testing.
Oh.
And like the genealogy stuff you can do. But through it, the first time I saw my mom in person, she said, Meredith, I need to tell you something in private. We did the more invasive genetic testing. Bad news is I do have that other breast cancer gene. She's a breast cancer survivor. So you are going to get it. But the good news is your dad is autistic.
That's right. Oh, I forgot about that.
And I did that joke for the first time without telling them.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then normally they're so supportive. I get a call or a text immediately after a show, and I got nothing that night. And so the next day I actually texted my mom, which proves I'm not a serial killer mom, because I do initiate communication with you. Sure. And all moms have found that one Facebook article floating around that says serial killers don't like to talk on the phone, and they've sent it to their kids. I'm aware. I said, hey, how'd you guys like the show? And she texts back, well, we liked the Jewish guy. Nothing about me at all.
If it makes you feel any better, my mom also loves the Jewish guy, aka Yale Hollander. So
she's an entire people. The weight of it is on your back,
Yale Hollander.
And it's Passover right now. How apropos.
Very fitting, but go ahead.
So finally she said, well, your dad's feelings were a little hurt about that autism joke. Which means she was embarrassed. And so do you think instead you could say that he has Asperger's and he's in Mensa?
What?
Yeah. Mensa, for all of you that are lucky enough not to know, is a genius society.
It is. It's true. She's right.
It's a genius society. He is, in fact, in Mensa. He is. One of my last acts of rebellion.
I didn't know that part.
Yes, yeah. One of my last acts of rebellion is, even though I could join Mensa, I refused to because I don't like exclusive clubs. So that's like my one act of adult rebellion. But so I just told my mom, no, I can't say that, Mom, but I can tell every audience from here on out that you asked me to.
Right.
Like that's how I thank you for giving birth to me, is by not keeping any confidence.
Oh my God. See, I love how you're like, oh, my mom's. Well, I didn't even ask my parents. They came to see a show which our mutual friend Spark Tabor produced in Cincinnati. Yeah. It was their first show they saw at this lovely club in Cincinnati called Go Bananas. And Spark was like, hey, I know you're going to be in town for this was obviously 2 years ago, but he's like, I know you're going to be in town for Christmas. Do you want to be on my show? And I was like, hell yeah, sign me up. So it's it's basically everybody that came back in town to Cincinnati. My whole family comes, my sisters, even a couple of my nieces. So and fun. I was like, listen, my parents have known me since day one. I'm like the crazy sibling of this family. So I got up there. I was like, yeah, so I took Plan B for the first time this year or something. Give it up for me. And I didn't even, my mom goes, I can't believe that you said that. And my dad goes, what is Plan B? I don't know. Literally, he didn't even understand the joke. So right. one of us could get into Mensa, one of us can't. So I am the one who didn't get into Mensa on this podcast. Meredith is like, that's the act of rebellion. I didn't go. I didn't do it. I didn't go. And I'm like, I was too dumb to get in, so I'm not going. But
well, it's okay. Now I feel like with dating, I can tell guys are sizing me up with could I make a basketball baby with her? Here's the thing, you couldn't, because there's no athletic skill here. And even if you were an NBA player, there's no guarantee that it's going to weigh out my lack of athletic ability. But I can make you a brainy baby.
Oh, well, okay, we need some brains.
I can make you a tall, brainy baby.
So this is what I'm getting out of this podcast. And we'll get into, on this side of the table, we're going to have a brainy, beautiful, tall baby. And then on this side, my family is very athletic. So you'll probably get a football player or maybe I was supposed to be tall. That didn't happen. A lot of things didn't happen for me. So this is where we're at. So whatever, baby, good luck. But yeah, no, I'm just kidding, you guys. I'm very excited to be a mom someday. So speaking of
Jimmy.
Hey, Jimmy. This is what I'll make you laugh about too. So my boyfriend, Jimmy, who he does comedy
because
here.
Molly found a unicorn. Let's talk about this. Molly's in a functional, healthy relationship with another comedian.
It's true. I was not expecting that either. I encourage
everyone else to not try that.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't want to date a comedian either. So I was very surprised that even happened. But there's a joke that he had about I won't get too much into it because I don't want to embarrass him, but he was talking about his wife in a joke. And Meredith,
when I first started and I was still married, and I went up to him after the open mic and I said, hey, I'd love it if my then husband and I could have dinner with you and your wife. And he says, I don't have a wife. That's just for the bit. And I went home and cried because I was like, people are up there lying. Why would anyone lie? I don't. It was so heartbreaking. I was so heartbroken. And yet I still dated a couple comedians. So what did I learn?
And I'm like, wow, look at these morons. They're all liars. I'm so jaded, and Meredith has a soul. I love it. But speaking of having a soul, this is a hashtag that I'm going to start doing. I always talk to people, and I love that. Thank you to listeners that have written in or reviewed or subscribed to the podcast. I get interviews. I do have interviews here on this podcast. I do. We're having one right now. But I have subscribers that write in and they go, thanks so much for being so positive. There's a lot of positive vibes on this podcast. I really appreciate that input. So I'm going to start doing for the season of spring. Man, guys.
We've only had one drink.
We've only had one drink.
Maybe
I just
Chris
can't talk.
did put something.
Gosh. It's because like Molly, because I refer to myself in third person, is exhausted. Like weird people on Facebook do when they write on a third person profile. Casually in bloom. It's spring, we're all trying to do things. We're trying to be productive. Or, if you're just, falling back into something that you maybe did before the pandemic or found during the pandemic and you're trying to carry it on. Casually in bloom, just what are you blossoming in during this time? You could be even, what I always say about stuff like this is like, it can be something small, just like, putting your kids to bed on time or, doing laundry more, I don't know, like taking out the trash. But what I asked some people to write in, and I'll actually read those first before I get into myself. So Bridget Yu from Florissant, Missouri says she is casually shopping for a new condo and maybe even getting a new tattoo. Could be all the opportunities.
Yes.
Yeah, Bridget, get that new tattoo. And then Julia from South County, St. Louis, Missouri, casually launching my business, which is very productive. Casually trying to figure out where my hot UPS guy went. I think he changed routes. Did he go on your route, Meredith?
He didn't. In fact, a guy that I love listening to, Dr. Henry Cloud, he co-wrote Boundaries, if anyone's read that book. And he's got all this new stuff about dating. And especially for Christian women, we're often like, God's just going to bring a man
into my house.
Door. And he's very clear, like, unless you're planning on dating the UPS guy, you need to get out of your house and start dating other people, because that's the only guy that God is going to bring right to your door.
I know. I think we're just spoiled with Amazon nowadays. We're like, unless he's a hot, which I've never, here's the thing, Meredith, and I've had this discussion a couple of times on this podcast, and one of them is with our mutual friend, Brendan Olson, who's been on the,
I did the milk jug challenge with Brendan.
See,
we tried to drink a gallon of milk and he puked right next to me.
Oh my. When was this? Was this recently?
I was still blonde.
Oh, so this was a while back. Okay. So he and Megan Phelps came on, and I was talking about an Amazon driver that actually tried to rob me, which was a whole other story. And before I got into that point, Megan's like, was he hot or something? And I just was like,
I've never seen a hot.
I've never seen a hot. I'm like, where are these hot?
Because people are always like, maybe that baby's the mailman.
Yeah,
like, that's always
mailman
been a thing.
Is this? Like,
so who are these mailmen? And follow me at Meredith Hopping.
Pop the tool.
Thank you.
Pop that handle right on the screen. But yeah, I haven't had that either. The only guy, I told them that I had, I think this was the only episode I mentioned it on. And if there were other ones, I apologize, but not really, because it's worth talking about. When I was in high school, we had this really hot garbage man that would come out, and he just had like these beautiful blue eyes. And I was like 16 and awkward, obviously, in a school uniform, because I went to an all-girls high school. So there, don't worry, you got that Catholic background there going on. But that's the only guy. And then I haven't seen anybody beautiful since. So if you're a hot UPS driver, hot Amazon driver, I've already spoken for, but please follow Meredith Hopping. There you go.
I am not.
But what about you, Meredith? What is making you casually in bloom?
I think what I'm trying to hold myself to, especially as we're in this, has it really been a year, right? Since the initial shutdown and since the initial 2 weeks to flatten the curve. Is I am really, and this goes along with being a recovering people pleaser, I am really trying to settle into boundaries and the art of saying no. So, which is very hard, both as a woman and as a people pleaser and as someone who has shared custody of my children, where I feel like in the time that I'm not with them, I'm supposed to get everything done. Like,
Right.
I've got to be a good steward of that time in order to honor that I don't get to be with them. And especially this week, the way it falls with our custody is because it's an odd year. My ex-husband gets them for both spring break and Easter. And that's falling consecutively this year. So I ended up not being with my kids for 12 days.
Oh, yeah.
And it has depressed me and made me feel horrible. And I realized, like, oh, I'm not getting my stuff out for the first hump day happy hour of the month. And I was like, oh, I'm in charge of that. I'm not doing it. Right? And like, no one has the expectation that it needs to be on there, that it needs to happen. And I'm instead putting invisible pressure on myself when in reality, I don't want to do that. I want to take care of myself and both be aware of the grief that I have when I'm separated from my children and know, okay, what do I do to care for myself in this? And so really just saying no to what doesn't serve me.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Saying no to what doesn't serve you. Oh, I'm going to use that in my everyday life now.
I'm sure I stole it from someone. I mean, I don't want to.
It's okay. We're not going to be like, excuse me, this is a copywritten
and
phrase.
All I've done, I tried to do a solo camping trip last summer.
I
ended up sleeping in a Walmart parking lot because apparently you got to make reservations at a campsite.
You do. It's true. As somebody who did do a lot of camping prior to this, we can go into my whole Ohio history on a different podcast, but that'll be different. Key, do you mind popping on the mic for a second?
Hi.
Hi. Oh my goodness. So everybody that is listening, I know on YouTube you can't see her, but on audio, this is Key. She's one of my favorite people. She works amazing. The tech. Hello. Key, what are you doing that's casually in bloom? Why don't you tell us while we're sitting here?
Boring.
I mean, that's fine. I mean, it's not like, we can do any crazy ragers right now. So it's fine. What do you can rage by yourself in your apartment. Is that what you're doing?
I do that every day.
Right.
Every day is a rager when you're Key.
Cheers to that.
Yeah.
Well, you're like doing a bunch of shows here, right?
Yeah, I think for sure focusing more on promoting myself instead of like other people and getting my stuff out there, knowing that I do a lot of stuff, but
you do.
Yeah, making sure people know that I'm doing it and having it on like my YouTube and stuff like that.
It's true.
I'm going to be traveling with my undefined friend that I've been
What DTR
stands for define the relationship.
I was like, Meredith, what was your little abbreviation that you had earlier before we started recording? Where are you going camping?
No, we're going to be taking a few road trips.
Oh,
that's so fun.
I'm still on camping. I'm like, where are you going? Are you in a tent? The Walmart parking lot? What's going on?
I guess we'll be camping. I don't know, but
who knows?
What is the initials again?
DTR.
Yeah.
Define the relationship.
Not done that. We're just hanging out.
I like
and
that.
And that's fine.
That's fine. So you're going on road trips. You're doing cool shit. That's awesome. Yeah. She's like, sure. Well, thank you, Key, for that input.
Anytime.
Anytime.
Trying to be safe because of COVID and stuff like that, but
responsibly.
Yeah, responsibly going on a road trip. I understand that. I've been doing a lot more meditation lately, which I know again sounds like a cliche, but there's a podcast I've been listening to, and that's going to be my casually in bloom. It's called Mindful in Minutes. Okay. And it's this really just nice woman. Like, she just sounds like a good person. I know it sounds like weird because you're listening to somebody's voice, but just her meditation, it kind of goes into all the positive affirmations that I want to do, which I will say why I'm doing it is really because I have an issue. And what I love about you, Meredith, is that you're so open to positivity. I am a positive person, but sometimes I'm very skeptical to it. And I feel like I'm a little jaded for that. So one of my goals is like, not everything is bad and not all positivity is bad. And people who exude positivity, such as Meredith or
it can be annoying. Let's be clear. Let's be clear.
I've been trying to add that more into my life, and I found this podcast, and I don't do it every day, but I do it like every few days or so, and it's a nice way to be centered. And then there was another one I thought of, and I didn't even write this down, but I thought of you, speaking of your oracles that you have on Facebook, where you're
Oracle makes me think of Never Ending Story.
Oh, I love Never Ending Story.
And then the ladies with the phoenix, are phoenixes?
I think so.
With the boobs that kill people with their eyes.
Oh, I gotta rewatch this. What? I just remember the big fluffy dog. He knows. I just remember the big dog that was in a Never Ending Story.
Yes, that's the energy I'm coming into summer
I'm on that bandwagon
2021 with.
Oh, absolutely. No, that's the energy we need. We got to go in there.
Boobs out, eyes killing.
That's what I needed today. I told Meredith and Key earlier, I was like, oh my gosh, I had to drop all this money on my car. And like part of it was just because car life. The other part was that I should have jumped on this sooner. So I should have just jumped in with boobs out or eyes or whatever we were talking about. But whatever we were saying with the eyes, something like that. Yeah. And I was like, oh my God, I'm so sad about this. And then I thought about your post, how something happened with your car and you were like, I could have been super sad about this.
Oh my goodness.
But I went and took a walk.
Yeah. Yeah. It's broken down a few times during the pandemic, but
mine too. Yeah.
I decided, no, it's 3 miles to my apartment. I'm going to walk and see what I see. Yeah. And what would I have missed if I hadn't taken this walk in this time? And it was also super liberating to not call anyone, right? To just have the car at the shop and be like, oh, I did this on my own. Yeah. And it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that's what I did. I dropped the car at the shop this morning. I went to work. I was like, this is going to be hard. But then once I got it back, and I mean, it was a lot of money. I paid it. But then once it was like working and stuff, I was like, oh my God, I handled this. And it was done.
There's something about, and it's not, I hate the term adulting. I want that to die. I think that's real dumb. Yeah. However, there's something about mundane things, getting them done, that remind you that living is possible.
Right.
It sounds silly, but it's just like, oh, this got taken care of. This happened in order for this to now work. And there's something super satisfying about that.
Absolutely. See, that's why I thought, I was like, oh my gosh, Molly, you got to have more faith in yourself. Like, you can handle this stuff. It's going to be okay. What we ask at the end of each episode here is, what advice would you maybe give yourself now from back when, or possibly anybody in your position, or just anything that you would casually advise people at this time?
Yeah, I think my biggest mantra in life is to tell myself that I don't know everything and that there is always something that I can learn from everyone. And so I have like a pump up playlist, right, that I listen to.
Me too.
Before a show. But one of the most important songs on there is Humble by Kendrick Lamar. And is it Humble? Is that right?
Yeah, I have it on my playlist.
So that reminder to like sit down and shut up and be aware of your surroundings and be aware of who around you has the gift to give you of wisdom, because one of the most beautiful things about humanity and life is that not a single one of us have the exact same experience. And so there is something to learn from literally everyone. And if you can accept that and also have a healthy balance of, oh, I know what I'm good at and I know what I'm capable of, and yet I know that I can always be better. And I only get better by asking other people and seeking out ways to be better actively. So
yes. Beautifully phrased yet again. But speaking of beautifully phrased, what I was about to say, what other great things can we see you talk about or do? How can we follow you on social media?
Yes, please follow me. Yeah, Key. That's what she gets paid the big bucks for.
Exactly.
Follow me on social media. That's definitely the best way. I told myself that while the kids were gone, I was going to learn how to build my own website. That hasn't happened, but I'm going to work on it. And I do keep on my Instagram, I keep all my shows updated. I've got some shows coming up in Peoria, Illinois. And also mark your calendars for May 8th. That's Mother's Day weekend, a Saturday. I have a very exciting show that's going to be at Mad Art Gallery. And it's going to be a full supper club, full dinner, hearkening back to the days of Mrs. Maisel.
Yes.
And all the comics will be dressed up. And so I had to ask guys, like, do you have a suit? Mm-hmm. And so it's going to be a very exciting evening, a great thing to bring your mom to.
Yeah.
So you can bring her to this and then maybe not have to go to church.
Yeah. I love that. That's great.
Sorry, God.
It's
Sorry,
all right.
no, God does not care. Oh, I need to stop. Let's just stop. Let's stop. It's a good stopping point.
It's a great stopping point. Just remember, speaking of stopping, you should just stop right now and casually subscribe to the Casually Mollie podcast. Mm-hmm. You can find us on Instagram, as you saw if you're watching on YouTube, on our lovely handle tool. You can also look up on Facebook. We're on audio, anything that, basically any audio services you can use or find, that's where we're at. And just remember, if you want to leave a review, just let us know. Like, what episodes are you enjoying? What do you want to hear on the podcast? Who do you want to hear? Just let me know. I'm more than welcome to take any thoughts or ideas. But now that our show is done, Meredith, I always ask, what are we going to casually do now that this episode is over? What are you up to next?
We're probably going to make Chris make us another drink.
We might. We got to go hit up Chris after this. Well, bye, everybody. Thank you very much.
Bye. Thank you.